the cloud. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for our special session on storytelling your way to success in both your personal and your professional life. So we're going to be talking about the concept of storytelling, why it's important, how you can tell a good story, and then breaking down what are the steps, what are some of the tips that you can keep in mind when you are telling a story, whether it's in your personal life, just telling a story, whether it's at an improv type of thing or to a group of people telling one of your Peace Corps stories, right? To not lose them with the glazed eye look, to professional settings for storytelling, when you might be using stories in a more professional environment, including the job search, right? When you're first getting hired, telling your stories, how to tell your stories in interviewing in a way that's going to be concise and yet really prove what they're asking. So it's going to cover a lot. There's definitely a lot to cover. And we have some really good, I have a video that I want to show you because in this webinar, I really had hoped to host my former colleague, Meleia Egger, who is a third goal storyteller extraordinaire. She's a guru in doing that. She's amazingly talented and just did a lot of really great things when she worked at headquarters alongside me, working with the third goal she was in. And unfortunate for us, but very fortunate for her, she is on maternity leave and enjoying the first weeks of being with her newborn. So she's not here in person, but I'm going to bring her to you via a video where you're going to at least get a snippet of maybe 8 minutes of her talking about some of the tips and techniques. So great. So we're going to go ahead and just move in here. Let's talk about defining storytelling. And let's go ahead, if you are able to put in the chat box, use the chat box for any kinds of questions that you have, as well as if you want to, contribute to what we're talking about. So I'm asking folks to spend a moment to try to define storytelling. So brainstorm, we'll brainstorm together a little bit, afterwards, but how do you define storytelling? And this can be in the personal or professional context or just the general context. So take a few moments to do that and we'll go from there. So thank you. And again, just put your definition of storytelling into the chat box. And we'll compare some of what we've got coming in already. Great, thanks, Wesley, appreciate yours. Maybe give you about 15 more seconds to do that and we'll go forth. All right, let's go through what we have. We definitely have some things coming in here, which is great. Leslie, thank you so much for sharing yours here. You came in right about, let's see here. Actually, Hannah said, how do you define storytelling? Please share. And then folks are coming in with what they had first. I see actually Kelly, storytelling's an art, a message, a journey. Everyone has a story to tell. Oh, that is so true. That is great. Thank you. That's a really good definition. And Anika or Annika, I'm not sure how you pronounce your name, but hope I didn't butcher it too bad. A story recounts something that happened or was imagined. It may or may not have a takeaway lesson. You're absolutely right. Sometimes stories have a takeaway lesson, right? And it teaches you about a culture or, people or something like that. Other times it is just for humor or, what have you, right? So it doesn't always have to have that takeaway lesson. Absolutely. Great. Let's see, learning from, there's Wesley, yes. Learning from other people's unique experiences, right? Absolutely. And I can tell you, you all have very unique experiences as returned Peace Corps volunteers in a variety of different countries. I can guarantee you, you can remember, I'm sure, some of the funniest, weirdest, wildest moments that you experienced, right, in your Peace Corps service. So absolutely. It's a tool to build connections. Yes, absolutely. That's a key one that I'm going to hit on here. And those connections are a variety of connections, right? It's everything from, personal connections. You meet somebody and they're a really good storyteller, you bond with them. You have this, like, they're able to draw you in with, the way that they talk, the way that they tell stories. And it can invoke trust, and it can help you, really form personal connections that, great friends. I mean, sometimes, you even have, long lasting, lifetime partnerships that can come out of, that type of skill set, right? So it can really help you a lot in the personal and professional environment. In the professional, the building connections, in your interviewing, right? You're telling your story. And if you do it in a way that proves the point and connects them, right, it kind of helps them feel more connected to you, which is what you want when they're looking to hire you, right? So that's great. A narrative or of something imagined or actual, great. Yep. And that's recognizing that, let's be honest, not all not all narratives are a true life story, right? Sometimes it could be an imagined, you come up with a story, and some people are so creative and come up with these amazing stories. I mean, look at the types of books we have out there that are just incredibly inventive and imaginative. I'm always in awe of that kind of author who can really do that. So great. The 3 P's. Excellent, Isaac. Yes. Person, problem, place. Yes. Those are a very important part, right? Absolutely. Great. And then Jennifer and Nathaniel, convening an experience, setting a scene, making relatable something that may be different or unique. Absolutely. Kind of goes back to that, like bridging those gaps or those differences, right? Absolutely. So great. Okay. Thank you. So good examples here. Thank you so much. Storytelling is a huge concept, right? Absolutely. So great. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go on to, we're going to a little bit here about defining storytelling. And again, there's so many ways to define it, and you have shared so many of those, which is great. This is, an alternative here. Storytelling is a means for sharing and interpreting experiences. And so in that, stories are universal, and so they can bridge culture, right? How many of you remember the important part of storytelling in your Peace Corps service, right? In maybe I know in my village, storytelling was one of the ways that they really passed down culture too, right? And these incredible, and it was also a way that we got to know each other. They wanted to hear stories of my life and me of theirs. And storytelling was able to bridge that incredible gap. I mean, we couldn't have been more different in many ways in the start. And yet we became so connected and so much, just together. We were a family, really, from that experience. So absolutely. And then, like I was saying, I mean, they're used to teach, culture, to pass down culture. But as I already have said, and as we'll see as we go on, storytelling has a role in personal and professional life. And so we're going to spend time on both. I'm curious as to if there's a preference, like if you're coming today, what your perspective is, just an informal kind of poll. Are you wanting to spend a little more time on the storytelling in the job search, career search, that type of arena, or more in the personal, storytelling, connecting with people and, story slams and things like that? If you have a preference, I mean, we'll cover both of them to some degree, but if a lot of people want one in particular, I'll maybe spend a little more time on that one than the other. So happy to do that, and it can be flexible as we go along. So just dump that in the chat box if you do have a preference. Okay, great. So storytelling, why is it important? And I had to grab this image because, believe it or not, this image is not from Peace Corps, like the Peace Corps archives, the Peace Corps media, what is it called? The digital library. There are a lot of pictures like this, but boy, doesn't this look like a typical, right? Maybe, Peace Corps, whether it's a Peace Corps reunion or a S.T.A.R group or whatever they were called in your group, your group in service, right? And, doing some kind of a storytelling or sharing information. So had to grab that one. But storytelling, really, the great thing is it creates engagement with the audience, right? That's the really big thing. One of the really big things. It invests them in the story if you tell it correctly. So unfortunately, if the story is not told in a way that's maybe a way that's drawing people in, if instead you get into too many details, which is easy to do, right? There's so many details about when you're talking about your village and you're trying to tell one story, but if you get too deep and too down that alley of that many details, you're going to lose your audience. So you've got to be able to, right, create engagement, tell enough of it that you're going to be able to have them have a vivid image, and create this vivid image without feeling just, bored or just, blaze-eyed, look. It can also really motivate and inspire the audience, right? So that can be, taking action, right? It could be, that could be in a business setting, right? You tell an inspirational, story or some kind of story to your clients, and it's really impactful and powerful. And that can encourage them to, I want to buy this. I want to be part of this. And so that can very much be in the professional aspect, as well as in the personal connection, of course, right? Can build brand loyalty, all of those kinds of things. But it also shares information with the audience. And I think the key here, what I mean by digestible format, is those nuggets, right? It can share information in small nuggets that piece together, create this overall compelling story that is one that people want to hear, right? They want to listen. It draws them to you. So absolutely. It can also help bring people, together from different, backgrounds. Sometimes storytelling is used in, for example, conflict resolution, right? Where there might be two parties or two, factions that are really not getting along. They're, whatever the situation may be. And by storytelling, you can actually find sometimes common ground. You can find, common emotion, so that it can help, I guess, provide a feel of more of a, okay, we're not that different. We can work this out. Let's, it can propel people to be more committed to working for a solution to get through something, if that makes sense. So, okay, great. So let's go on here. And we have, there's the Peace Corps Oral Histories Archive that I want to just talk to you about really briefly, because in the beginning of this, I'm using more like your Peace Corps stories as a sample in your like personal ones, right? Just because we all share that, we all, know that. And we maybe all have struggled at one point or another to be able to tell a compelling story that doesn't give that glazed eye look reaction, right? And so you kind of hone it, you get that better. So, but I want to point you all into the direction of the Peace Corps Oral History Archive. Is a really cool, it's a cool thing that exists, right? It's part of the Peace Corps collection in the JFK Presidential Library, right? But there's this project that's called the Peace Corps Oral History Project, and you can find more at their website, which is listed right here, peacecorpsoralhistory.org. I believe is what the website is, and they have you can schedule to tell your story, to be interviewed if you want to be interviewed and share your Peace Corps story. Portions of it, obviously, right? And you can become part of that Oral Histories Project, and part of that was, I think part of why they wanted to do this was they realized that, Peace Corps goes back to the early 60s, right? So the individuals that were in Peace Corps in the early days are now pretty old, right? They're older. And they don't want to lose that history. I mean, some of their stories are, and many of the people who've been interviewed, are from that generation. And, we want to make sure that we document that so that it's a living history that can go on beyond all of us, right? And so they want to get people of all, ages, services, times that you served, all of that. But it's a really cool concept. And there's we're not going to watch this video, but this is there is a video here, The Many Faces of Peace Corps, and they have, some different, like the Oral History Project. You can go and learn more about that if you're interested. It's part of, I think, the Museum of Peace Corps as well. So it's a really cool, very cool concept. So now is when I'm going to introduce you to my former colleague, and it's going to be her just giving some tips, on finding and sharing your story, right? She's not doing a story, unfortunately, in this, but she's giving some of the tips and techniques that she uses to make sure that a story is spot on and will, be compelling and will reach your audience and all of that. So at this point, I'm going to actually turn on, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment because my colleague is going to share this video, Hannah. Thank you, Hannah. You can certainly share it. And once it's going in the end, once it starts about submit your stories for, this certain event, we can turn it off. But yes, this is just, she's going to talk about, tools and tips for storytelling. So I hope you enjoy it. It's just about, we're only going to listen to a little less than 10 minutes of it, but it's a pretty good video. So good content. Thanks, Hannah.
Hey everyone, my name is Meleia Egger and I'm Peace Corps' third goal program specialist. I'm an RPCV from Malawi, and I wanted to share some quick tips and tricks for RPCV storytelling that I've learned over my experience of storytelling training to get your stories ready for Peace Corps' first ever storytelling contest. So why do we focus so much on storytelling in third goal? Stories have this new, incredible sort of wave of popularity we've seen from TED Talks to the Moth. They really can humanize your country of service by letting us get to know characters from your experience. They can also teach us intercultural lessons in a funny and poignant way, and they really stick, so they really can achieve Peace Corps' third goal, so your audience will learn something about your country of service. So I'm going to take you through some ideas for finding a Peace Corps story, because it's an intimidating process to think back on your 2 years of service and sort of pick out a story to share publicly. I'm going to take you through some tricks and tips for honing and crafting your story that will make it really succinct and memorable and just sort of well thought out. And then I'm going to take you through a few tips on how to share your story. So we're going to start with finding your story. Like I mentioned, 27 months, poignant, funny, amazing Peace Corps experiences. How do you select a story to share publicly? There's a couple of brainstorming activities I've given to RPCVs over the years that sort of help when you're just sort of intimidated by the overwhelming amount of information that you have to think about. So one tip is to give yourself a 2-minute free write where you sit down and you write in chronological order every person that you met in Peace Corps service. So it's kind of daunting, but if you do it chronologically and just give yourself 2 minutes, it's kind of a nice way to dig up some characters you might have forgotten. Another thing you can do, a similar list, is sort of places you went, again, chronologically, and that'll give you some interesting settings that maybe you hadn't thought of before. If you stick to the 2 minutes, you go chronologically, things come up that are surprising. Another important part of finding your story is to think about the deeper meaning of the story. So why are you telling it? The why, sort of the deeper impact of that story beyond the entertainment value of the who, what, where, and when. Thinking about that why is important when selecting your story out of your 2 years of service. And then finally, you might want to try using certain prods, creative story prods, like the word, think about a Peace Corps story around the word like almost, or the moment I knew I arrived. These sorts of creative words or phrases that you can just sort of use to hone in and focus in on something like a theme. So for honing and crafting your story, I find it's really helpful to start back at something that we all sort of learned at one point in elementary or middle school, which is the story arc. But I've sort of reimagined the story arc for a Peace Corps story, for an oral Peace Corps story. And so it just sort of shows you the components of the story arc and how much time you should spend on each of them. So it starts out with the context, and you'll notice that the context is pretty brief for an oral story. And that's a challenge for our PCVs because the context is going to be your country of service. So you have to think of a way to convey your country of service in 30 seconds to a minute of spoken, which is really challenging. That's something it's important to get as succinct as you can because you want to move into the action because that's the bulk of your story. So getting from your context, which is really brief, into your action is a challenge, but it's something to work on. And once you're in the action part, that's the actual events of your story. You're getting into dialogue, you're getting into the tension. How can you build the tension? What's the challenge of your story? So spending a lot of time in the rising action and building that tension in the story arc is important. And then, your change, your shift, your climax, your conclusion, however you want to call it, you want to make sure that your build is towards that. And then you can have a little bit of falling action at the end, which is again about 30 seconds to a minute of sort of closure after that. But as you can see from the shape of the arc, you're really focusing in on that tension. So that's important. And then next, there's an activity that helps move you through the story arc by thinking through the key moments in your story. And this is called the story spine. And I find this is very helpful when you're thinking through how to get through that arc of your story. So the story spine is just this helpful tool to take you through the key moments in the story arc. And the story spine goes like this: once upon a time, and every day, until one day, because of that, and then, until finally, suddenly, and the funny thing was, ever since. So with each of these lines, you fill in a key sentence in your story, and it will just help you move through the story arc effectively and think through sort of the key bullet moments in the story. So beyond the story arc and the story spine, there's some other tips and tricks that you can use to hone your stories and to make them really shine. So one component is framing your story. And what I mean by that is picking a first and a last line that convey the deeper meaning of the story. And it's sort of like bookends. And maybe when you say them next to each other, it would sound a little bit too planned or cheesy, but at the end and beginning of a story, people have sort of forgotten, and it's just a satisfying thing for the listener, and they don't really know why. So writing a couple of pairs of first and last lines and memorizing them is a really good way to sort of bring your story to the next level and really make the meaning of the story stick with your audience. Another important component of a good story, especially a Peace Corps story, is the senses, bringing in the senses. Everyone knows how visceral service is. So the smells, the sounds, the sights will really transport your listener to your country of service really effectively. Another important component of a story is characters. And in an oral story, it's a little bit different from a written story. In a written story, you can have many, many characters, and you can have family trees, and people can refer back. But in a spoken story, it's important to really only pick very few essential characters. So even if you have a whole bunch of students, picking one that sort of represents the bunch so that your listener can follow you better. Another important component of a story beyond the arc and the plot components that we discussed is insight. So letting your listeners into your brain and keeping what's called the ignorance of the moment. So it's important not to comment on things that happen later to sort of give away what's happening. Remember what you knew at that point. What did you know as a fresh, Peace Corps volunteer in your site, or whatever that point in time was. Don't sort of ruin the ignorance of the moment. Remember who you were and what you knew at that point in the story. So another important component of storytelling would be using the rule of threes. So the rule of threes is just a trick in sort of any speech writing or even in just writing. And it just says that threes are very satisfying. So if you can pick 3 examples or 3 adjectives, if you have many, which usually we do, you can just pick the 3 best and keep it to 3. And then sometimes if you can alter the third one, if you have a series and the last one's a little different. So for example, if I say, for breakfast, I had toast and eggs and milk duds. If the third one's different and funny, that can sort of also be appealing to the listener and make your story just feel a little more polished. So those are some other parts of making your story shine, some other components and tricks that I've learned for storytelling. finally, I want to share a few tips on the actual sharing or performing of your story. So most public speaking tips hold in storytelling, but one that's a little bit different, I think, from especially from acting is being authentic. In acting, you're trying to be someone else. And in storytelling, you're trying to be as much yourself as you can. You want your personality to come through. You want to get the audience on your side by being very authentic. So part of that is that you don't want to memorize your story. If you memorize a script, you can get off script and it can throw you off. You want to feel comfortable moving through your story, sort of in a conversational way that allows your personality to come out. And like I said, memorizing your first and last line can really be a good way to start strong and end strong and get to that meaning. But again, just being authentic and comfortable. So you also want to practice your story, practicing with friends, practicing with family, fellow RPCBs. And we have a peer practice guide for you so that you can get the best and most helpful feedback on practicing sort of timing your stories. And then lastly, you want to pace your delivery to get a laugh, just roll with it and sort of be very even keeled in your delivery of the story and let people follow along so that you're not too fast but things move at a pace that's comfortable for the listener. So finally, if I were just going to leave you with my 3 favorite tips using the rule of 3s from the training, I would say be authentic, be as brief as possible, and then use the rule of 3s. I really believe that Peace Corps stories can change the world, and it really is one of our best tools for achieving the 3rd goal. So I hope that everybody and all our PCBs have amazing stories, will participate and submit their stories to our storytelling contest by July 1st. And at any time, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at thirdgoalpeacecorps.gov. We look forward to hearing all your stories.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I really appreciate you sharing that. What did folks think of that? You're welcome to unmute and just chat about it as well. What'd you think about that short video?
I loved it.
Yeah.
A lot of great suggestions in there. I appreciated the refresher back from elementary school.
Yeah. Right. That whole the arc, you mean, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I am with you. I really, I love what she did there. I mean, it's so powerful. I think it makes it more, I don't know, it makes it more attainable, right? Like you can, it makes it easier, I guess, or to think of, right? It's maybe not as hard as we think that it is. Sometimes people think storytelling, oh, I'm just not a good storyteller, I can't do that. But the reality is we all can do it, right? And so that's I think another thing. So all right. Any other comments on it? Any other people like it, or what you didn't like? If there were parts that you didn't gravitate toward, that's fine too. Feel free to unmute.
In the chat, there's enthusiasm for being able to see it again. Is it available online?
Yes, actually, and if it is available, and let me see if I can just put that here right now. Hers actually, Hannah, I think you have the jumbo long link. Sorry, we can make a bit.ly link, but yeah, if you go to peacecorps.gov and you go to their like digital library or the resources storytelling, you'll get to it. It's Meleia Egger tips for storytelling. But Hannah, if you just want to put I don't know if you can make a bit.ly link real quick, or just it's a jumbo link. Like literally, when I sent it to her to have her share it, it's ginormous. It's probably the biggest link I've ever seen. But yes, you can get to it, and I can follow up with sending that as well. And if folks aren't receiving some of the follow-up things, there's sometimes people, the way that you have your subscription chosen, it opts out, so you don't get that. Apparently, I don't know, I've had a couple problems with that. So I can send that in the follow-up that I traditionally will send out. It generally goes out, I aim to get it out within a couple business days. So it's Friday, so I'd want to get that follow-up stuff done by probably Monday. But if you don't get it, give me a holler and I'll make sure to get you the info because I obviously have it all right there. There's also a really good tips sheet that is based on this, that's on that same, around, if you kind of, I'll make sure to have that included as well, because it's very good. Let me see, I might have it right. I think I have it right here. Let me get this before I go ahead and share my screen again. That way people can have it right now. All right, here you go. It's there's two, actually I have them right here, and they're hyperlinks. So hopefully this will work when I just dump it into, let me just see here real quick. Get this going here. All righty, I'll dump it into the chat box. And that way you can look at it at your leisure. Oh, it may not, does it? No, it doesn't do the, okay. Those are the titles. I will get those to you afterwards. I don't want to spend too much time on the on that, but here I'll just try to copy the link. Here we go. I'll do it one more time. I think this will work. All right. Let's see. All right. It's not that long. Okay, good. That's shorter, at least than the one that I sent to Hannah. So that way you can go back and you can review that on your own, and such. The one thing that I like to really encourage people to do on the personal, front in terms of storytelling, there's a lot of ways that you can get better at storytelling, right? And, one of the things is, looking at like that, the tips sheet that she provides, one of the activities that we do when I have longer, if it's an in-person event and you have longer, you would break into two, and then you would each tell a story, and it would be like a 5-minute story. And then you would, or 5 to 7 minute, and then you would, the person would give you feedback on, okay, I have questions about this, I didn't understand that, whatever, and they, parts that they didn't really get, and then you would do it again. And you would do it like in a 2 minutes less version. And then you would finally do it in like that 60-second to 2 minutes, which is more typical of your interview. So really powerful way to do it. You could also tape yourself, do it with a family or friend member, but that would be my homework to give you to work on trying to hone your personal story. And, you'll be asked about your Peace Corps service, throughout your life, really, and other things. But I think your Peace Corps service is something that really stands out oftentimes. I served so long ago, and I have people who are like, oh, you were in the Peace Corps, tell me about it, right? Tell me all about it. How many of you all had, when you first got back, whether you were evacuated or you've been back for years, when you got back, did people, they'd be like, oh, it's so great to have you back. You're going out with them for a drink or what have you, back in the day when we could do that. And, they would like, oh my gosh, tell me all about it. And you were excited, and you're like, wow, great, they want to hear. And so you go into trying to give all this experience and all the details, and like 30 seconds into it, right, they're, let's order, let's go, whatever. And it's hard. Because how does that make you feel when you had that happen? For anyone else who had that happen, put your little hand up in your little emoji, option on your screen if you can. Did you have those? Did you ever have that happen? And how did it make you feel?
Jodi, I have a question related to that. So one of the things that because I have told my story a lot, one of the things that I've found is how do I keep it fresh for me? Because if I just tell the exact same story over and over and over again, my eyes are going to start glazing over, and that's not going to be very interesting for other people. So do you have any tips on how to keep the story fresh?
Yeah, and that's a very good question. I mean, I think it comes down to not after you tell it so many times, you're going to have it memorized, right? And the danger of storytelling when you have it memorized, right, is that you lose that extemporaneous, right, when you're telling it. It becomes more of a script. And sometimes, especially after you've told it a lot of times, I'm sure, your own voice becomes more less animated. And so that can lead to less connection and less of that, impact, right? And you're bored with your own story, which is not good either, right? You probably get less bored with your own story than maybe sometimes others will, because you know all of the things behind it and the emotion, and you have that. But yes, I agree with you. You want to try to keep it fresh. So I think part of that would be, certainly, the further away you get and, from the experience, probably by default, you might be shortening it a bit, right? And, or telling certain parts, but maybe not the whole, but plan to, not have it, maybe try to flip up the way that you tell it a little bit, maybe you start with the why, right? Which is, the Simon Sinek, right? Has anyone heard of Simon Sinek's, he has a great TED talk on start with the why. Hannah, if you can maybe drop that into the chat box while we're doing this, that would be awesome. It's a great one. And it's, he explains, and gosh, I haven't looked at it for a while, but it's when he talked about the computers, right? His computer thing. He didn't start with, we are, the name of the computer, company and such. It was more, he told a story about the organization, and he would tell about how, the why, the what was done, and then in the end it was, we are Apple or whatever it was, right? I mean, he was telling the story about another institution. Does anyone remember that? Has anyone heard that one? It's not very long, but it's a really powerful concept where you're starting with the why versus, just the I'm Jodi, I'm from here, I'm the whatever. When you start with the why, it's more like, I am committed to making a difference in career, blah, 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 whatever. That might be my, like that why. I'm passionate about making a difference in career, the career resources field. And then you're going to talk a little bit more about what it is. Not, I'm Jodi Hammer. I'm originally from the Midwest. I did Peace Corps. Then I came back. That can be a great tool actually to use when you're doing an interview. We're going to talk a little bit more about job interviews and, that type of thing. So yeah, I would say try to maybe change it up a little bit and, look at some of the different ways that people tell stories, right? And there's different thoughts on how to do it, right? And then try to fit your story into that other one and see if it fits. Maybe you'll like it better and you'll feel more energized and want to tell it, more again without feeling bored yourself. Absolutely. Great. Anyone else? Any other questions? Are there any other questions, Hannah, before I go back to sharing the screen for the last, 14 minutes? We don't have too long left, but
yes. Anika asks, we need to choose PC stories. I mean, we need to choose the stories that challenge rather than reinforce stereotypes, right? And be mindful of who the bad guy is, if there could even be one.
Yes, no, I think that's a really good point that you're bringing up there. You don't want to tell stories that are going to reinforce stereotypes that are not, right? Like, unjust stereotypes, that kind of thing. That said, sometimes it's, in the beginning, you might be actually introducing, when I first arrived in I thought you might have had a stereotype, right? But then you're breaking that down over the course of the story. And coming to that more point of connection and, that, better place to be. So yeah, no, that's a very valid point. Yep. You don't want to use it in a damaging way. So, all right, good. Any other questions there, Hannah?
No more questions, just many comments.
Okay, great. Well, good. It's amazing. Yeah, way to learn. Oh, this is awesome. Yeah, you guys have some really good. That's oh, and you all have ideas. I love it. Thank you. Revisit your journal. Yep, exactly. Great. I love it. Oh, and Cal, you did start interviewing RPCVs through the Oral History Project. That's so cool. Wow. So you're an interviewer.
I want to really put in a plug for that because they, not to diminish what they've done so far, they have about 1,000 interviews done, which is impressive. But when you think about how many volunteers there have been, and sadly, there are people who have passed on who never got a chance to share their story or did. So really want to encourage people to do it, and they need a lot more people on the interview team.
Do they?
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a learning curve. I wouldn't say it's quite as hard as PST, but it's pretty hard. But once you get up the curve, then it's actually pretty pretty easy and really, really rewarding.
Yeah.
And
that's
I think,
great.
as I mentioned in the thing, I really think that learning how to interview people is really valuable. And
Absolutely.
I'm not worried about there being enough photos being taken in our era, but I am a little worried that there aren't enough oral histories being recorded. So
Gotcha.
one of the things that this has motivated me to do is to start capturing more family stories in
Oh,
oral
nice.
history.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's, a good exchange, not only telling our own stories, but also capturing those of other people.
Yeah.
If you go to the website, I see the question here about how do we get involved. If you go to the
Great.
website there, you'll see it's got a sign up for being interviewed, which is a prerequisite to actually being an interviewer.
Sure.
So
Rightfully so.
I don't know if it's cricket to put your email address in the box, but I have a list of people I'm interviewing, but I would be happy to interview some of you if you have interest in doing that with the expressed idea of becoming an interviewer.
Yeah.
So I'd like to help increase the capacity there. So if somebody, is it okay for me to put my email address in the box? Okay.
Of course. If you want to put it in, absolutely. And that's great. Thank you. Cal, you have such a nice voice too, and pace. I that's really nice when interviewing people. You're asking questions and that's great.
That's the first time anybody's ever commented positively on my voice. So
I think
thank
it's
you.
nice. It's just very relaxing, it seems. Yeah. So you put people at ease.
Turn
Okay.
the mic off because the lawnmower is starting up.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so that's great. So there's some great stuff here. I'm excited to see that, and I'm excited to see people are interested in taking an active part in the storytelling as well. That's great. Let me go ahead and just share my screen again here, and we'll go forth here. And please, again, if you do have questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer any of them, or oftentimes you get great responses and feedback contributions from the audience, because we all have experience in different areas. So I liked this infograph, right, if you will, mostly because I love at the bottom the spoken messages, right? Your messages delivered as stories can be up to 22 times more memorable than just facts. That is huge. And what I take from that is anytime I can tell a story to kind of prove something, right, versus just the facts, that's going to make them understand it more. It's going to, connect us. And, regardless of what context it's in an interview, for example, you're going to achieve a much better rating and results from your interview if you are able to do these kinds of things, right? Give a concrete example of whatever skill, not just if they say, tell us about your project management skills, and you just say, oh, they're excellent, I've gone to school for it, and I'm really good at it and always use them. And I mean, that's what you're just kind of always this, whatever, versus, sure, I have 3 years of direct experience in project management. One example would be in my most recent where I insert the data. I'm not going to just make it up here for you, right? Just to save time. But that is, it's more telling. When I was here, this is what happened. Here's how we handled the situation, right? So yeah, we're gonna look at that a little bit more. We have another one on interviewing and such. But this one, it really, you're looking at the how it affects the brain, right? And I'm not going to read this all. You've been able to look at it, but it really the brain releases dopamine, right? And that's what help that when it experiences, right, this emotionally charged event, and it's then easier to remember. Right now, sometimes it can be the dopamine from extreme stress, and you'll never forget that trauma, right? But other times it's from just the experience, getting more from the experience, and more emotions in it. And yeah, so I just think this is a good graphic for us to remember when we're thinking about storytelling and why it's important, right? Meleia did a good job of, I think, including, she had the arc of the story, right? And this is really just looking at like the steps of storytelling, right? So you're first, you're creating that setting, right? To give a little bit, a little key, little, not too much, but a little bit about the context, right? The situation and the context. You're introducing characters. So who's involved? Limited amount, as Meleia said, you don't want to have too many characters in an oral, story. It's too hard to follow, right? So, when we were talking about some of these tips before, when she realized she wasn't going to be able to be here for the event itself, she said, you sometimes you might use one character that personifies, maybe you were a teacher in Peace Corps and you had lots of things that you learned from your kids, right? But you had like one child that you're going to be spotlighting, but you may be introducing some of the things that happened with other children, but to this same, within the same context, as a way to keep it simple versus so complex. And then this other person, and then, oh, this situation was, and that situation. So it's less easy to keep things straight. So that's one tip that she gave as well. Creating the suspense, right? And the curiosity, right? And then, the suspense dissolves, right? You get through it, for better, for worse, whatever happens, right? And then, that ending, you kind of wrap it up. Now, when we're talking a lot about doing storytelling in like interviews and responding to questions, we talk a lot about the S.T.A.R methodology or the S.O.A.R methodology, where it's the S.O.A.R, like soaring like an eagle, right? The situation, then the obstacle, then the action that you took, and the results. And don't forget the results. A lot of people forget the results in the story. And that's the most compelling, and it can be the most important part, right? Talking about what you learned from it, for better or worse. It may not be that everything turned out great. It may have been a complete failure, but what did you learn from that? And never would I again look at, whatever, you might have some compelling type of sentence to wrap it up or whatever. But I know for me, one of, and I'm not going to, for time's sake here, I'm not going to go through the entire, story per se, like in the exact way that I would do it. But I remember for me, one of the most compelling like memories of just my Peace Corps service, and just, this was Peace Corps. This was my service, was the morning that I had gotten onto one of the buses that goes into the little, into my, nearest kind of, bigger city that I could get things from. And I was so excited. I got on and I was like the first one to get in there, and I got my little, place next to the window, and I just cracked open my book. I was all excited, right? And the chickens are loaded up and all that. So it's just everything's kind of crazy, but I'm just doing my own thing and having a great time. And suddenly they stopped in, mid-route, and there was all this like flurry. And this woman, one of my mothers from my mother group, who was pregnant, very pregnant, was getting on the bus to go to the hospital to have her baby. She was having contractions and they were coming very soon. She wobbled on, whatever. I didn't even see her get on because I was so immersed in my book. But pretty soon everybody turned to me and they were like, Doctora, Doctora, because I was called Doctora Jodi, Doctora Jodi. I was not a doctor. I do not have an MD. I am not any sort of doctor, but because I was a public health worker, they just like associated me with, doctor. And I could say, oh, no, I'm not a doctor. And it didn't matter. So they were all, motioning me, you've got to, we've got to come up here. And so I, run up there and we're like timing her contractions. And we like, somebody got up and she was able to like, lay down on the thing, and I'm, go, let's go, whatever. And they're going toward town, and we stop. And the pig gets loaded up. And I just looked out and I was like, this is Peace Corps. When I'm looking out, and here's this woman who's having contractions less than a minute apart. She's going to come any time now. And they're loading up this pig. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be delivering this baby on this bus. Like, here's my pre-service training. So I'm not going to go through the rest of it, but we made it to the hospital, just barely. But it was this whole like, wow. But it's one of my most memorable moments. I will never forget how that story, and it just is yeah, it's just like as powerful today for me internally as it was then. I can just completely feel the emotion that I had, then as well. So just storytelling in the interview, right? You're not going to be telling those kind of stories necessarily, right? Although there might be times where they're asking you about a time you experienced conflict, right? In a work environment or in a team environment, and how you dealt with it, right? So you may be going back to some of your Peace Corps service, stories, but don't always do that. Definitely choose other ones as well. If you were in grad school, you might have a conflict resolution story where, or there was a, conflict story and such teamwork issue. You could point to, maybe you were in an assigned group project that was the whole semester long, and you noticed that one of the team members wasn't really bringing forth what they were supposed to when they came to the meetings, and wasn't showing up sometimes, and how you handled that, right? And that might be, well, I called a meeting and, to just check in how everyone was doing. Come to find out that our colleague, her mom just died. Of course, she was not in an area where she was able to focus on that. So we redistributed some of the work. She had a bigger role in the presentation at the end of the semester. We took on more of the research, blah, whatever. And in the end, it worked out really well. We got an A. We're very proud of the experience, blah, blah. Like, that's just an example, right? But they're going to ask you behavioral questions like that, right? Tell us about a time you demonstrated your XYZ skills. Give me an example of, because they don't want to just be told, oh, they're great. You need to prove it, right? And storytelling is a way to prove your competence, prove your point as well, right? In a business type of environment, right? So it's very important. The elevator pitch, and again, we won't have long to go into this, but your elevator pitch is more, that might be used when you're networking again, and you're going to some networking events or whatever. And, it's that whole, oh, what brings you here? Tell me about yourself. You have to be really, creative in how you're going to do that. You don't want to be, if you are a job seeker, you don't want to be like, well, I'm searching for a job. I just need any job. You don't want to exude desperation. I'm an international development professional, and have, recently returned from doing, public health work with Peace Corps in Ecuador. And I'm now looking to learn more about blah, 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 and whatever, you can tell a little bit so that you kind of know what each other's looking for. And then they might have people that they might know something about what your field is and things like that. So you can do that. You can do that very well. So, but it's a kind of a story, if you will. And so again, I want to say, in your career, right, just like in your personal life, storytelling, is key, right? Effective storytelling. It's going to get you hired, right? The interview. It's it's going to help you to sell whatever product it is. If you're in any kind of sales or marketing services or products or whatever, right? It's going to help you connect with your team, other teams, help you get promoted into leadership roles if you want that. Not everyone wants that, I get, right? And it's going to instill confidence in you and confidence among them, the like leadership, right? Like, say, leadership of the organization in you, like they trust you, right? So you can really go far with storytelling in the personal and professional context. There's great things. I would encourage any of you to try to get involved with. Another resource is the there's a podcast called Peace Corps Stories, the unofficial podcast, and it's used to be produced by Greg Emerson, among others. He's part of the RPCVs of New York group, the affiliate group with NPCA. And they had, I loved listening to those. I got so hooked. I couldn't stop. And I was listening to them like late at night and all of that. So they're really, just great stories that, some of your fellow RPCVs have told. And they work with people to help them get better, right? Here in DC, we have the Improv, which a couple times a year at least does a storytelling, open to the public type of, contest, right? Where you can apply to be one of the storytellers. And, it's a lot of fun. I've gone in and watched them and really had a great time. So there's a lot of great things. And there are some stories that are on the Peace Corps site too, where we did a storytelling contest internationally, where the winners were flown back to DC, and they had this whole week or two of professional development, including they got to tell their stories on the stage of Millennium stage at the Kennedy Center. So it was pretty amazing. And they recorded those, and they're really powerful stories. So, and yeah, and as it turns out, one of the, I think it was Portia, one of the people who was the storyteller that won, served in Ecuador, worked in my same area. I was in like 3 different kind of regions, right? And with the mothers from the mothers group that I had started before that, which was such a small world, right, story, but it was such a connection. And yeah, it was great. So any final questions or comments that you want to make? We are at the end here, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. But thank you so much for being with us, and have a great weekend, everyone.